Welcome to the Gastonia Conference Center. I appreciate you spending your time here with us on a Tuesday night. Understand that there was some problems out on the interstate, so probably people will be coming in stuck in traffic. So again, appreciate you being here to listen to the presentation of the Fuse District. We have our team that have been working on this project for probably going on 2 years now. So very exciting information. I'm Michael Peebles. I'm the city manager here in Gastonia. Would like to recognize any elected officials in the audience. If you could please stand. I know we have several city councilmen and the mayor. And yes, Commissioner Hovis, you have to stand up. That would be inappropriate if you didn't. So I appreciate all of you being here, and as well as all the other employees of the city and past elected officials too. So we'll get started. Just some logistics of the meeting itself. Be presenting information for the first 45 minutes, and then we'll stop, answer questions, and then on the other side of this wall, I don't know that you saw on the other side of the wall, but we have breakout spots, probably 6, I believe. So if you have a very specific question, we'll be able to answer that over here. So that's varied from streetscape, parking, athletic field itself. We have a new website that we'll be talking about later on. So we'll be prepared just after 7. We're moving over on the other side of the wall. So hopefully you'll join us after that first hour. So again, please take all your questions until the end, after the presentation, and then we'll have that 15-minute time period to take those questions, and then again we'll take specific questions on the other side in the breakout sessions. We are streaming this live, and this also will be recorded and available on our website later on, so just some logistics. All right, we're going to start out with something that you're probably familiar with seeing. This has been the logo for Fuse for some time now. And you've seen this too. I'm not going to read directly from this. How I've introduced this project to most groups that I've spoke to is that this is an economic development project. That's what this is. It's anchored or catalyzed by, oh, it won't work. I have a fancy new remote toy here. Okay, look at this. Multi-purpose facility. So that's what you're going to hear Mr. Cole talk about, the design of that actual facility. But what we're trying to do here is fuse 2 areas together, Luray to the west and where you're at right here in downtown. And this area, 16 acres, where Fuse is where we're talking about. And we're going to talk about the development of that, the public investment, and then the private investment. All right, so for those that are not familiar with this, we are downtown. And then the Fuse area that we're talking about here, and then Luray. So this area in between, fusing the areas together on Franklin and Main and 2nd. So these are the areas that we'll be talking about tonight. All right, so more specifically, the areas here are Trenton, Hill, Clay, Franklin, and then Norfolk Southern to the north. These areas that are highlighted are the areas that the city of Gastonia has purchased and will host the facility. So specifically, let's see if I can point this thing. Right here, this is the Save-A-Lot grocery store. Hill Street will remain, and all of this area will be the facility. So that leaves Trenton Street open. And then the Coca-Cola Choice Fab Tech building that is referred to in usually 3 different ways. And then Trenton Mill, the over 100-year-old mill that you'll hear more about later. And then of course Norfolk Southern to the north, and then the Highland community just here. So this is what we're going to be listening to tonight. This is what we envision as phase 1. This is what Jonathan will be talking about as the facility itself. So we're going to walk through 3 different phases. This is what it could look like after this construction project. So you have the Coca-Cola Choice building here, Trenton, and then the new facility here, and then the Save-A-Lot is here. So you see the facility itself, and then the development pads around it that will be created for that private investment later on. There's the second phase. So a development pad here along Trenton, development pad here along Franklin, filling in with the facility itself. All right. And then the third phase. And this is development in left field along Norfolk Southern. This is the largest private development lot available. So you'll hear about these things, these private development pads, and they're available. It doesn't have to be phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. We would make these available for any private developer. So if someone was interested in this first, well, by all means, the city would love to engage in any conversation and agreement for developing that product. So that puts it in a little bit perspective for you, hopefully, for those that aren't exactly familiar with the site itself. And I think we're going to turn it over to Mr. Cole from Pendulum Studios.
Very excited to be here this evening to talk to you a little bit. Some of you, I recognize your faces from other times that we've had public meetings where we talked about the design. I think what you'll see tonight is, as Michael mentioned, we've worked together with staff over quite a bit of time to take your comments, incorporate them into our design. But I hope what you see from this is really how the design has evolved and progressed. When we first started this project, really the multi-purpose facility was the entire site itself. So you see here, 9.4 acre site, as Michael mentioned previously, is bounded by Franklin to the south, Hill to the west. I'm sorry, yes, that's right, west. And then we've got the Norfolk Southern Railroad to the north there. And then to the east, we've got Trenton. So really our focus working on the facility itself in the 9.4 acres and where you'll see the field and all the amenities that go around it is within that 9.4 acres. 1.4 acres of which is to the north, which is bounded by the railroad there, which is parking itself, which is approximately 140 parking spaces. As I mentioned before, when we first started this process, or this design, we filled the whole site with just stadia, if you will, facility. One of the things that staff, as we worked with them, focused our attention on is the opportunity to make this an economic development project. If you look at other facilities that may be being built now locally, if you look at other projects for sport regionally, or even nationally, most of the time you see a stadium, if you will, and some parking. But what we've done here that I think is interesting, and staff has been involved with this intimately with me, is figuring out how to compress the overall field and all the components that go along with the multi-purpose facility, and truly making it multi-purpose, opening up opportunities to create vistas into the facility. That's what people want. I've designed 26 ballparks in my career, built, and probably 50 others that haven't been built. They're just sitting on a shelf somewhere. This project, though, is one of the first times that we've really been able to compress the footprint of the overall facility and open up opportunities. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the development paths around the site itself. We're going to start at the main concourse level. One of the things, and I'll just backtrack a little bit, one of the things that we've done in order to be as economical as possible with our design is we've balanced the site. This site slopes, our low point of the site is basically here, where you see, for lack of a better use, home plate right behind at the corner of Franklin and Hill. That's the low point of the site, so we'll call that 0. As you walk up towards Trenton Street, that's about a grade change of about 15 feet. I don't want to get too technical for you, but I just want to kind of give you a feel for how this overall facility fits into the site itself. Then as you walk up Trenton North towards the railroad, that rises another 10, 15 feet. And then as you go across the parking lot back towards Hill, it starts to slope down again another 10, 15 feet. And then finally you slide back down to behind here at the corner of Franklin and Hill, and that's you're back at zero. So what we've done is we've really made good use of the site itself. So your pedestrian access here right across the street from the Coke building, that's pretty much you're at grade at that intersection there. So as you walk around, one of the things that we've seen in our experience in designing sports facilities is the thing that people want to see is the field. That's the first thing they want to see, regardless of what configuration it is, whether it be baseball, lacrosse, football, soccer, whatever. People want to get a view of what we call the community green space, because that's really what it is. It's a green space that people are able to walk around. You'll notice in this design that the entire concourse, you can walk all the way around the concourse. So one of the nice amenities that we talked about with staff was being able to, in a non-game or a non-event situation, walk around the concourse. We'll get to the field or get to the utilizations of the concourse a little later here. I don't want to give it away. But the idea that you can use the concourse as a walking trail is a pretty important feature that we really thought would be a nice community asset. So again, thinking of the field itself as a community green space that everybody can walk around is a pretty neat feature. So at the main concourse level here, as you are at the corner of Trenton and Franklin, you've got some restrooms. You've got bullpen facility that's also there in the green number 4. That can also be used as an area for kids to play around in a non-baseball situation. There's a refreshment stand right next to it, open air with covering over it. So again, great vantage point to be able to catch whatever sports on the field itself, but a really nice amenity. You'll notice here along Trenton Street, the development pad number 5, again, we compressed the entire facility so that you could have a 60-foot deep development pad. We envision that to be at some point in time, and Omar will get into this later in the presentation, that could be a hotel, that could be residences, it could be a number of things, but the idea that you build this up, whatever you do, you build that up 4 or 5 stories, now you've got direct views into the field of play, which is really nice. Same thing along Franklin Street. Now that's a little bit of a deeper of a development pad, number 6 there on the plan. That's 80 feet deep. But again, the idea that you can build up 4 or 5 stories, have retail or some sort of commercial on the first floor along Franklin Street, and then another 3 or 4 stories above that, where you can actually look directly into the field. Again, a great amenity. You see things like that in cities like Lansing, Michigan, just built 5 additional stories in the outfield that looks directly in their old condos. There's a precedent for the ideas that we work with staff to come up with, again, to spark the idea of economic development on the site, minimizing the amount of footprint that we have for the ballpark. Again, I think it's important to note, when we first started design, the concourses came all the way out to the sidewalks. Thinking about the future phases, we compressed all that. You still have ample room to circulate around the facility itself, around the field of play. But again, this gives you great opportunities for the future. Doing it in phases, or like Michael said, it could happen all at once, depending on what happens in private development. As you circulate towards the north, towards that pad 36, that's yet another development pad. We have that earmarked for it could be potentially a restaurant. We have a beer garden there. It's a large bar with concession stands and restrooms out there. On top of that, which you see here in the rendering there, that's from the bullpen area, or the kids' playpen area, looking back towards the field. That's a 2-story space. So on top of that, we can make it a bandstand in the first phase. It could be a number of different things that are, again, great for community use. Still overlooking the total field itself, the field of play. As you walk around the facility, number 25 is, again, a concourse area, parking there to the north. And then we've got some neat features that we'll show you. 24, again, giving a nod to the railroad just to the north there. We're we're simulating box cars, and we're putting furniture inside, and we're making interesting group areas. Again, great feature. I can't wait to show you guys the rendering of that. And then number 26 is the grass seating berm. It's at the same slope as the bowl behind home plate, and behind the center area there. Again, really nice feature for fans to come out, throw blankets, sit on the grass, kids can mill around and play, roll around in the grass. A really nice feature. 23 is a group area, tent area, open space, and then our main access area there. So for trucks, cars, things like that, to be able to access the field. One important note, I'm just kind of dancing around here a little bit, but the field is artificial turf. So what that allows is, again, multi-purpose, multi-use for the field itself. You can do camping on the field. You can do car shows on the field. If it were natural grass, you'd only be able to use the field 3 hours a day, 4 hours a day max. By it being artificial turf, we can actually use that field for multiple things, up to 14 hours of programming a day. Something we've done in another project in Detroit, Michigan. That's one of the reasons why we program that in, because you can maximize the use of the facility, and the field itself being artificial turf will take a lot of abuse. We have a state-of-the-art drainage system under the field, so you don't have to worry about standing water. This can take a lot of punishment, a lot of rainfall on the field itself, and it'll go away within minutes. So you don't have to worry about rainouts for any kind of event that you might host. One of the things that we've done, as we talk about the bowl itself, is we really started developing the concept of neighborhoods. As we work with staff, one of the things that we wanted to do was, if you go to larger facilities or just traditional facilities in themselves, normally you look at the seating bowl and it's like 16 rows, 15 rows. I've designed plenty of those. What we've done in order to really accommodate a multi-use aspect of this facility is we've stretched the bowl out. So it's only 6 rows. 6 rows of seats. That accomplishes a couple of things. One, it helps us balance the site. 2, it creates, you feel like you're right on top of the action. And if you want to go to a sporting event, you want to sit as close as you can. Well, you're only 6 rows back everywhere. You know, you're not 20 rows back, you're not 15 rows back, you're 6 rows back everywhere. So you're right on top of the action, which is really nice. The entire field is netted, so no matter what sport you play, you don't have to worry about getting hit by a ball. You've got a 35-foot tall net behind number 17 there. Behind, down each line, you've got another 25 feet, 35 feet of net. And then even in the corners, you don't have to worry about getting hit by a line drive. If it was soccer, you wouldn't have to worry about that. So you can sit at the refreshment areas there and not have to worry about keeping your eye on the field. Because again, the whole thing about a multi-sport facility is you want to be able to enjoy a number of things. You want to be able to enjoy the entertainment, you want your kids to be able to run around and still feel protected. So we've got all of that covered. You've got your standard concessions, restrooms. One of the things that we really think is nice about the design here, you'll notice in number 12, as you walk up that grand stair, again, the first thing you get to see is the field. A lot of times you go to these facilities and you walk up the stairs and you're looking at the back of the building. We didn't want that. We wanted to open that up to create breezeways. It's a fully covered concourse between number 8 here and number 8 on this end here. So that's totally covered. You're in shade. Because of the orientation of the field itself at north-northeast, the sun sets behind the building, so the major mass of the building is in this area here. So as the sun sets, this entire portion of the field, the infield skin is what we call it, will be in shade. Another one of the features that we talked a lot about with staff was making sure that no matter where you are in the facility, that you are protected from the sun. There's different aspects of that. Some areas are more shaded than others, but taking advantage of getting the views, being able to step outside of the weather, not have to leave just because it rains, because you have covered areas where you can grab a beverage and stand on the concourse. Really important features that we take into consideration. We also talk a lot about having what we call semi-premium amenities. You go to a lot of facilities and it's premium, corporate suites and things like that. Well, in this facility, we talked a lot about marketing to maybe not having to be a premium
approaches these projects. So, in looking at the scope of our project here, the city engaged us April 2017 while they were kind of still thinking through kind of the stadium, or the facility, what it would look like, what it would entail, and they wanted to make sure that the private development was going to come at the same time as the facility. So in total, we're looking at 6 potential development paths. We have Trenton Mill in the corner there, in the top right, and that there's already a developer there. We'll talk about that in a bit. We've now shifted to the Coca-Cola pad that you see in the bottom right, and the hotel pad across the street. And then in future phases, we'll look at the restaurant in the corner, the office pad, and then the north pad, kind of north of the stadium right there, that will could be future residential, office, or mixed use. So here, in looking at this pad on the north side there, that's one of the largest development pads, and as Michael said earlier, in kind of thinking about where we're going to head next, we're open to kind of developers kind of talking about, and looking at different sites as we're kind of moving through this process. So the restaurant pad that was talked about earlier, that is actually a recent addition, and it's something that that the city's continued to kind of focus on, is to kind of look and add as much private investment to this area as possible, and that was why the restaurant pad was actually added up there as well. So one of the areas that we're now starting to focus on is in red there, the hotel pad. There we're looking at a select service hotel that could be anywhere in the range of $15 to $20 million investment, and somewhere around 100 to 120 hotel rooms. So then on the bottom here in red is an office pad. The reason we're looking at this as an office pad is really because there's enough depth, 80 feet, on this pad to support what would a typical office floor plate would look like. So you can see, so here, just standing at the entrance, right across the street, Trenton is kind of where the Coca-Cola building is, and kind of creates this really grand entrance into the stadium. So our process, when we're kind of approaching private development and thinking about how do we attract private developers to this, well, we want to think like a developer as well. So our process involves a market, site, and financial analysis, and it's all centered around the design and the program of the building itself. So we want to know what can the site support in terms of the market, in terms of how many residential units can the Fuse District absorb, how much office square footage, how much retail square footage can this area absorb. And then once we get that, we'll work with an architect to kind of plan out the building itself, and then run financial analyses to see what's actually viable. The one thing that we really differ from in terms of how a private developer approaches the project is the public interest. When we come into these projects, we want to make sure that when we go out to the development community and try to attract private developers, that they already have a sense of what the city's looking for. That way, we can kind of hit the ground running when the developer joins the team. So, in talking about Trenton Mill, this was actually the first project that we looked at to try to attract a private developer. And just to give you a sense of kind of what we call the solicitation process, when we first started this, we reached out to over 80 firms. We had serious conversations with about 15 of those firms, and that resulted in 6 responses from the development community. We then had interviews, the city selected someone, and they ended up selecting a group out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, Lansing Melbourne Group. L&G, they're based out of Florida, but they work all over the country. They just finished a historic mill renovation in New Hampshire. They just finished up a hotel in Michigan, and they actually just recently closed an agreement with the city of Kannapolis to build a $43 million project that will include apartments, retail, and a parking deck. So they were selected to adaptively upfit the Trenton Mill into about 75 apartments and 2,000 square feet of retail. So you can see here, this was a design that was put together by Tice Keister, an architect that we worked with to kind of put together the financial analysis for this project. And you can see here, we're looking at studios 1s and 2s, and LMG is looking at a similar mix of units as well. So there's already a developer at Trenton Mill, so we've started to shift our attention to the Coca-Cola pad. The Coca-Cola pad is almost 4 acres, so it's a large development opportunity right there, and it has the former Coca-Cola building on it. That building itself is about 50,000 square feet and represents about up to $8 million in private investment. But since the site is so large, it can actually support additional new construction and parking. So when we're kind of thinking about what we can really program in that space, we're starting to look at this building as a really unique space and a unique opportunity to create a brewery, a restaurant, event space that really takes advantage of the unique characteristics of the building. So just to give a couple of examples, full steam pony source in the pit, they're all in Durham, but you have potential rooftop amenity that the Coca-Cola building can support. You can have outdoor seating, beer garden space right outside of the building. Full Steam itself, that's a brewery in Durham. It's literally just a warehouse space, but they've created this really vibrant area because they host events, and there are people out there all the time, and they kind of went for a simple vibe. When you look at Sugar Creek Brewing in Charlotte, they ended up going on a much higher upfit to create a really nice event space. The Coca-Cola building could go a lot of ways in terms of these visions, and developers, when they come to the table, will be looking at all sorts of ideas that will be financially viable. So when we're looking at a timeline for this space, we're starting right now to perform the site analysis. Once we kind of have a program laid out, we'll be able to move into a financial analysis. We'll meet with the city, meet with the city council, give them an update as to what's going on in terms of the feasibility of the project, in which then we would go out to solicitation in April to find a developer, just like we did in the Trenton Mill process. And one thing I wanted to note here is there's the big kind of warehouse space that's right connected and adjacent to the Coca-Cola building. There's already a concrete surface there. It could make a great kind of event or parking area. So, talked about all these development pads. The last one here is the hotel pad that we're looking at in green, and very similar timeline. Actually, the same timeline. We're starting to look at program layouts now, and we'll perform financial analysis to get to a solicitation in April 2019. So, in looking at a high-level timeline, we're going to be performing pre-development analysis kind of through the life of this project, with the stadium kind of starting construction this summer for an opening date in summer 2021. Trenton Mill, that construction is likely going to kind of finish up right around the same time that the stadium opens or right after the stadium opens. So we talked about kind of how the solicitations were released in April, and kind of following the same process, for Trenton Mill, this hotel, Coca-Cola pads, we'll go through our pre-development process for the additional pads that are on site as well. So all told, when we're looking at all 6 potential private development pads, we're looking at roughly $50 million of private investment that's going to be leveraged by the fact that the city's building this anchor facility on site.
Hey, I'm Melody Brady, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the financing of this facility for the city of Gastonia. Back in 2016, council approved the land acquisition, which is basically a 16-acre facility. The city to date has spent a little over $6 million. That's spent and encumbered. We've spent about 5.6, and then we have under contract an additional $600,000. The estimated cost at this time of the facility is $21,500,000. We're in North Carolina. We issue debt through the local government commission. Our interest rate is expected to be around 4.75. That is a conservative rate. The debt will be a 20-year term. And based on the 21,000,005, our debt service will be 1,702,000. So how are we going to pay for it? If we start at 21,500, we're anticipating using about $1 million in electric fund transfer. We're hoping to have private fundraising of about $2.5 million to bring that debt issuance, the amount we finance, down to $18 million. If we get that down to $18 million, our debt service payment would then be the $1,459,000. So that's what our payment would be. We have hotel occupancy tax. Hotel occupancy tax for the city of Gastonia is 3% of your rate when people stay in the hotels within the city limits. We have one hotel that's getting ready to open, and we anticipate that revenue, the additional revenue from the new hotel, to be about $100,000. So we're going to earmark that from our new hotel to go toward debt service. We've already saved about $750,000 that we can pay annually toward debt service. We're working with Gaston County for the area around the Fuse project to have a special tax incentive area. Basically, how the values grow, we will receive from the county the growth from that revenue. That's estimated to be $5,000 at this time. We have current debt service that we'll be paying off. That's about, in 2020, we have about $365,000 that we'll be retiring, and then 21 we'll be retiring an additional $105,000. So what that leaves is about $134,200 that we do not, at this time, we don't have to pay our debt service. We have asked Gaston County, they have a similar 3% hotel occupancy tax. We've asked their travel and tourism to participate in the project, and we're still waiting on that commitment. And then there's naming rights. And so we hope through those two, we can close this gap and pay our debt service.
All right, I'm going to keep this part brief because we're running a little behind. It's almost 7 o'clock, and we definitely want to take some questions. And just remember, in the breakout sessions, we'll have the opportunity to answer questions as well. So folks ask, what's the annual operations of the facility? This is an estimated cost of about $220,000 a year, and then some upfront capital expenditures to equip the facility with necessary goods. So we'll move that. Also, a question that's asked often is the Sims part. What are you going to do with Sims? Sims will remain in what I call our fleet, our offerings, and hopefully, in working through our Parks and Rec department, we feel like we would be able to experience some growth in revenues from increased use of that facility. And also, if you're looking at hosting tournaments, Fuse facility would be great, but that's only one field. So having Sims really assists in being able to attract tournaments and have games being played at the same time. All right. So I'm not going to go through these too much, except for we're not alone. We've been blessed to have a couple of other projects that have been going on a little bit before us in North Carolina, Fayetteville being one. It's under construction now. I'm sure that they would enjoy if we had a break in rain right now, because construction is probably a little bit behind because of we're experiencing weather just not usual to North Carolina. But this project is being constructed. They are doing an apartment complex. It is in a historic hotel building, and then another hotel associated with their development. They're going to spend somewhere towards $39 million in Fayetteville. Another project that's under construction right now as well, it's in High Point. We visited this site probably a month ago. They're looking at spending about $36 million, similar capacity, and also a catalyst for downtown redevelopment in High Point, also with apartments and a new hotel. And that's what High Point will look like. And the city of Kannapolis, they have approved funding, just over $50 million. LMG is working with them on their apartment complex around the stadium, over 200. And then also they would be looking at hotels and ancillary development around their facility. And they just started construction in Kannapolis. So other projects that you may be familiar with, you may have visited, Durham, Greensboro, Winston-Salem, all of them have been around a downtown and served as a catalyst project for redevelopment, and very successful. Same thing here. And then that just sort of summarizes where all these other cities are right now in their investment and ancillary development, private development around in Winston and Greensboro. So this is probably the question I'm asked most. What is the schedule for this project? We will be completing in the next week, I believe, design and working with our construction manager at risk, Rogers Construction, or Rogers Builders, and getting a guaranteed maximum price. And that's what we will be taking back to the city council for their consideration. After that is presented, actually running parallel, we'll be going to the local government commission, like Melody said earlier, and seeking their approval for limited obligation bond issuance. So April, May is when the council will consider that financing. And then in the summer, we begin construction of the Fuse project, and then hopefully Trenton Mill will be coming along with that. And then the Fuse facility will be available in the spring of 2021. So hopefully all those timelines are met and we'll be able to open a little earlier than spring 2021. It really depends on contractors and their availability. All right, so this is when I'm supposed to unveil sort of the new dedicated Fuse site to you. And I think whenever you're leaving and going to the breakout session, we have a little flashlight for you. We were afraid to pass them out before since you wouldn't blind us, you know. Instead of throwing tomatoes, you would shine lights in our eyes. We have those, they're really neat. And they have this Fuse site on that. This will be recorded, as we said earlier, be available on that site. All the information that you were presented tonight will be available there. Everything that we have that we can put on the website will be available on that website. It's our goal is to be completely transparent and have all that information available to you. So I think right now we're going to answer questions for probably 10, maybe 10 minutes. And then hopefully you'll go to the breakout session and we'll be able to answer additional questions. I think some folks are going to make available microphones. You have that? Cody and Tori.
I was a few minutes late. I wasn't sure if I missed this, but how do we plan to address parking?
Parking, okay. So, and that's certainly going to be in a breakout session over here where we've identified already existing public parking, as well as hopefully be able to partner with some of our private citizens over here in this area, possibly churches, possibly the grocery store. You have the YMCA property that is directly across the road from where the Fuse facility is going to be constructed. So we've identified thousands of parking places. So what we would rather do is have density and have private development and then rely on that existing parking. And then whenever this is hugely successful, then we can invest additional dollars in going vertical and having additional parking.
Hi, I wanted to know what's going to happen beyond the railroad tracks. Beyond the railroad tracks on
the north side. Okay, so we're working with Norfolk Southern right now to improve that crossing. That will be one thing, hopefully silence that out. Right now, it's really the only at-grade crossing until you get down to Modena on Highway 7. So hopefully no more train whistles, that'll be great. the city maintains and owns that property right there. Hopefully we can do something to beautify that area. Into that, we have the Highway 7 study that we're talking about improving the streetscapes along that area as well. So that's really what, as far as the city of Gastonia, as far as site control has, that's what we own now and what we can do.
One more question, this is for Mr. Cole. You mentioned about there being seating for handicapped people. What about an escalator or elevators? You didn't say anything about that in your design?
Sure, there is an elevator right at the intersection or at the corner of Franklin and Hill that traverses, it connects all 3 levels of the facility. There's also a ramp entry from the north parking lot there near the railroad tracks. In that parking lot there's a ramp access directly onto. Correct.
Okay.
I probably missed it, but I wondered if there was any consideration going to be given to the area surrounding Franklin Park, the buildings and businesses up and down Franklin, something that's going to make coming to this Fuse site an attractive thing for people from out of town. Are we going to beautify any of that area?
Right. Great question. I think in one of the breakout sessions, along with parking, so Rusty is getting ready to be a very popular person answering some questions about beautification of streetscape and parking. You'll see some things along Trenton, and you'll see some things along Franklin Boulevard that are being proposed. Yes, ma'am.
Has there been any discussion about transportation in and out of the facility?
Transportation.
The shuttle buses, that sort of thing for the local area?
There has been actually a little of, we'll consider what is provided as parking. Now, is there shuttles needed to get back into downtown? Maybe this parking deck here associated with the conference center is used. Is there a shuttle that's needed? We can look at that. Another really popular thing is now what? Uber. So maybe some drop-offs, some pickups for Uber, Lyfts. And then we have a fixed route transit system. We own our own bus system, so we could certainly utilize that as well. But that's a great idea for shuttling to further areas.
The $21 million, that will be recouped, I assume, from tax revenue down the road from these businesses that will be coming in that area. How long has it taken for other communities who have done things like this to get that up and going and start to benefit from those tax dollars? And then second question, how long would it take then to recoup that?
How long will it take to recoup the initial capital investment of $21,500,000? I guess that really depends on how successful we are in planning for private development. So as quickly as we bring that online, then the taxes are paid, and then we'll reimburse that $21,500. We're prepared to at least present the council for their consideration, financing it as is right now with existing capacity, as Melody showed you.
But how long?
Others.
In other communities, how long does it take?
I think more, some have been more successful than others, right? So it just really all depends. Greensboro just had another big piece fall in the last year with some pillar construction, some office space out there. Winston was almost immediate with apartments surrounding it. Greensboro, almost immediate with apartments surrounding it. We would see a $15 million investment in Trenton. And then if a hotel was successful, that would be somewhere between $10 and $15 million there as well. So it really depends on how quick those are to be constructed.
When the entire project is filled out, or at least most of the way filled out, what do you think the economic impact will be financially?
It's really hard to say, Madam Mayor. Sorry, I gave you up. I think everybody knew you were. It's really hard to say because it depends on how vertical the construction is. If a hotel is there, it's 120 keys. It could be between 10 and 15 million dollars. If the property between Norfolk Southern and left field over there on that north side is developed and it goes vertical 6 to 8 floors, I mean, that's a huge investment. So it's really hard to say because we don't know what kind of development we're going to see. We'll do one more question and we'll go in to break up 2 more questions. I looked at you earlier and recognized.
Thank you, Michael. We're getting calls at the chamber for people that are developers outside of this community. They may want to be part of Fuse, but they may want to be up and down the Franklin corridor. We don't know if they have $100,000 or $100 million. What should be the next things that some of us should be stating or who they should be going to for those opportunities? And some might be in the room, so if you're here, I'm here as well to say hey today.
Thank you, Mr. Chamber of Commerce. Who should they go to see about other properties that are not in the site control of Gastonia? Did I read that correctly? So it's privately owned. Certainly we have an economic development department here in the city. We also have Gaston County Economic Development Commission that will also assist. And that is really the goal of this. When the city can only purchase so much property to prepare this for redevelopment. And then those, like the YMCA has that huge property south. There are other private landholders around that site. So hopefully they're going to recognize and realize the potential for redevelopment in those areas too. But there had to be a limit of what the city could actually construct. And we'll be able to facilitate any of those conversations. We'll be happy to help.
There's been a lot of talk about the beautification of just particular Franklin, but I'm concerned about the families that live on Airline, Pryor, Morris, and so we're talking about families that's going to be impacted by traffic, noise, and so what is the city going to do, or private development, because we're talking about economic development. A lot of people are going to benefit, and we're talking about families in that local community may not benefit, but they are going to be impacted by extra traffic, potential vagrancy, a lot of crime. So what is the city's, what is this particular project's responsibility to the families and the people that live in that community? What type of investment are we going to put back in those communities?
Very good question. I think what we'll see in those surrounding neighborhoods is this being the catalyst for redevelopment in those neighborhoods as well. Hopefully those folks that own property will invest in their properties. Values should increase. Now how drastically will values increase? Yet to be determined. What can the city do to assist in those neighborhoods? What we do in other neighborhoods. We want to be equitable across the city. Can we invest in better infrastructure, better sidewalks, paving streets, improving lights, improving access? Possibly this creates jobs for those folks that can just then walk to this job. That would be great.
All of that is good, and we talking off the cuff, but is something going to be written in stone that those families will benefit? Because literally, we talking about an area, and I'm from Ward 4. We talking about people who have lived in poverty for so many years, and so economically, they may not benefit. A lot of them are retired, a lot of them are from, I'm just saying, impoverished conditions. And so what type of commitment, solid, in writing, can this particular project make from a beautification standpoint, lights, and all of the things that you're talking about? Is it going to be in writing?
Well, you said writing in stone, and I'm ready to chisel, and I'm not going to write promises that we have yet to even discuss as far as the council as overall impacts and multiple years of impact of this development. We begin here, with this development, in this particular area. And hopefully we'll be out in those neighborhoods, talking with the residents of those neighborhoods and asking what kind of assistance we can be of. You know, that's why we are here, trying to serve those areas, just like every other area of the city. All right, last question.
I'm sorry, why hasn't that been
Okay,
done yet?
you got it.
Why hasn't that been done yet? Why hasn't the people who live in those neighborhoods that are directly beside or across the railroad tracks been contacted in any way for, you know, the impacts that it's going to have to their house, their property, tax values? It's a very old neighborhood. I've lived there for 32 years now. I've seen that neighborhood through many changes, and the few stadiums basically going to be right outside my front door. And I am concerned about the impact that it's going to have with traffic and, you know, the noise and stuff. And I am very much looking forward to what's going to happen, but I am concerned as a homeowner, longtime resident, what's going to happen to that area. And unfortunately, a lot of the houses around there are empty. They need to be renovated, they need to be remodeled, and I'm really curious if there are any plans to take some of those abandoned houses there, redevelop them, remodel them, rent them out. What, if any consideration is being done for the neighborhood surrounding that?
I think that's a very good point, and this is the last question. I'll be happy. I'm not leaving here for a while now, and our whole entire city team is going to be able to answer questions as well. Very good point. We can definitely go out, meet with neighborhoods around the Fuse area. I think probably conditions at this point in time have been improved, I would imagine. Some properties were not in the best of order. The Sears property was last used, I don't know when, I don't know what year, that 1988, so that's been a long time. The Budget Inn has been really used a lot up until the time we demolished it. So probably demolishing that structure alone benefited that surrounding neighborhood and area greatly, I would imagine. But I would love to hear from neighbors around that area, and hopefully this is going to be a win-win for everyone. That is why we're investing $21.5 million in one particular area. We want this to be a positive experience for all.
Get your neighborhood involved.
Absolutely.
Everything is unfortunately with this project.
I think there are ways that we can do that, and we'll be happy to try to call on and spend time in the neighborhood and answer all the questions that we possibly can. All right, we're going to open this up here in a second. Make sure you get your flashlight before you go. We really appreciate you attending tonight on a Tuesday. It's not the best of weather, so I know it's not the easiest to come out, but a lot of great crowd, and appreciate all your energy. Thank you.